Fear Factor. 15 minutes to your ideal retirement, Webinar 7. Why do we fear to think outside the box and instead follow the herd? Hello, this is Adrienne Berg with financial advisor Ronald Gielak, answering your questions in a 12-part webinar series on how to retire and live the life you love and deserve. This is the 7th webinar in this series, and you can find the other 6 at ronaldgielak.com. That's G-E-L-O-K. In the preceding webinar, we discussed how to build a tax-free money machine. In this webinar, we go further, and we ask, why do we fear to think outside the box and instead follow the herd? Ron, thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Adrienne.
So, we all know the problem. We buy high, we sell low. This happens because we wait for confirmation from others, particularly when it comes to the stock market. And Ron, in the past webinars, you've talked about so many different systems that really require people to think for themselves. But why do we follow the herd all the time?
I think it's human nature to want to be validated, and I think we feel safe if our perception is, well, gee, this is what everybody's doing, so this must be the right thing to do.
You've called tax deferral a pact with the devil, but not only do we do it, we even feel guilty if we're not doing it. Is there some sort of propaganda or media that gets to us so that we do start following the herd and just always think it's right?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's popular financial or money magazines out there that somehow, if we read an article and it's between the glossy covers of a major magazine, somehow we look at what's written there as gospel truth, when the reporter who wrote that particular article may know less on the subject than we do.
Just earlier today you mentioned to me somebody who actually canceled an appointment because they read something that was false. And we do call this entire series Fear Factor, standing for False Evidence Affecting Retirement. How do some of the things that are simply written by journalists, writers, even bloggers, make us follow a herd that isn't really doing very well?
Oh, yeah. It's so true. I mean, we just had last night, Adrienne, we had a client appreciation dinner where we honored 100 of our top clients for their loyalty and their trust and their continuous referrals to us. And these people were happy people. And it's one thing when somebody comes into us because they were referred by somebody who's been a client for 15 years, and then it's something else when somebody comes to us through a webinar or an educational event that we do, and they don't have a prior experience of a trusted family member, say.
Right.
And so what happened, I'll just tell you briefly, and I felt so bad for this individual, is one of the advisors in our office was recommending to this client that he consider rolling over a portion of his retirement account to a fixed annuity that offered index-linked interest, that offered lifetime income guarantees, that offered an income doubler feature for long-term care expenses, strong liquidity features, and it was absolutely perfect. Now, here's the sad part. This particular individual had a couple $100,000 in IRA CDs earning next to no interest, and then he had several other $100,000 in a very aggressive brokerage account. So on the one hand, he's got substantial loss potential on his IRA as far as the brokerage element, and then on the other hand, he's earning next to nothing on another portion of his IRA. Now, he went on the internet. He found a couple of articles that were inaccurate, ill-informed, ill-written, that were critical of index annuities. Now, I'm not saying that all index annuities are perfect. There's some that are way better than others, and we help clients differentiate between the way better ones in our view and the ones we don't like. but he got somehow tainted by misinformation that he was reading, and because he saw it on a website, he thought that that was somehow credible. And sadly, he said, well, I think I'm just going to leave everything as is. Sometimes leaving everything as is a prescription for disaster.
You know, we're doing 12 webinars that have a lot of meat, a lot of important detail. But we're devoting this entire webinar to talking about the herd mentality for one and only one reason. If you're going to continue to think the same way you always have, you're going to continue to get the same thing you've always gotten. And it isn't easy, and we respect the fact that it's hard to make a change. And of course, we're talking to pre-retirees and post-retirees that have long-term habits in the way they've invested and where their fears are and where their risk tolerance is. So I have to ask you point blank, Ron, are we too late? If we're in our 50s or 60s or 70s, are we just destined to follow the herd? How have you helped some of your clients break through that kind of mentality?
Well, I think that the people that we're able to help the most are people who are able to think for themselves, who are able to just kind of slow down a little bit and say, yeah, you know, okay, I came of age in the 80s and 90s with my investing, meaning a lot, if you think about it, a lot of baby boomers who were on the doorstep of retirement started investing in the 80s and 90s. So they saw tremendous growth during that period of time, and then they've kind of, how can I put it, got really slapped backwards in the 01 and 02 crash, but they were still pumping money into the 401k, so they didn't feel it as much as if they were already in retirement. And then they lost money horrendously in 08, but you know, by 2012, 13 or so, they had made it back and have been profitable since then. And people have short-term memories. And so what we're able to do is sit with somebody and take the time and say, okay, what would it be really like if we went through another 2008 and this $1 million 401k that you're counting on to fund your income for the next 30 years turns into a $620,000 401k? What would that feel like? And should we do anything before the next bear market occurs to protect some of that money?
And you know, in your past webinars, we go through different systems. And I do want to recommend that everybody go back and make sure that they have listened to and seen the slides on our past 6 webinars. But for now, let's talk about a few definitions, because the kinds of things that you recommend do require people to start to think differently. You mentioned indexed annuities. I would like you to start by just explaining that in a definitional way. Many people don't know what they are, or they've read about it, as you say, in a way where there's enough false evidence for them to have stopped thinking about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, this word annuity, I think, is somehow a little bit of an emotionally charged word, because there's so many different makes and models of annuities, and they're not all good. You know, for example, one type of annuity is what's known as an immediate annuity. This is where you trade a lump sum of money to an insurance company in exchange for a pension or stream of income, and you lose control of that lump sum. You have the income, but I'll give you an example. What's called a life-only immediate annuity, if, God forbid, you step off a curb and get hit by a bus, the income stops, the insurance company keeps the money. Now, we're never going to recommend that to anyone, but sometimes a person will say, oh, yeah, I have heard of an annuity. Somebody had an annuity and they died and the insurance company kept their money. I don't want that. Yet that's not what we're talking to them about. Or the other end of the spectrum is a securities product known as a variable annuity, which can have ridiculously, in my opinion, high fees and expenses, sometimes 3.5% per year or more. And we're typically saying, hey, you know, we're not recommending that to you. And then in the middle space is what's known as the fixed annuity account, where sometimes people think, oh, well, that's kind of like watching grass grow, where you might be getting a little bit better interest rate than a certificate of deposit, but I don't want that. And then people go, well, what else is out there? And we go, well, what about fixed annuity accounts that offer index-linked interest, that if you pass away, the full value of the account goes to your surviving spouse or to your kids or beneficiaries? What about accounts that have lifetime income guarantees that don't require you trading away your lump sum or losing control? What about accounts that have features that protect against catastrophic illness? Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and so because we read one article in one magazine that's critical of annuities, we sort of paint them all with a broad brush stroke as not being suitable or appropriate. And I'll tell you honestly, for every 100 annuity contracts that I review, I'd say 98 of them, 99 of them I'll throw in the garbage because they're written in favor of the insurance company, in my opinion, and not the consumer. But there's a handful of products that are absolutely ideal for the right situations.
Now, I also want to make clear that in the systems that you have described in past webinars, you've also included money management, not only insurance products or annuity products, so that there's no one-size-fits-all. And I think that's another problem in following the herd. We want to keep our life simple. We would like to glom on to one solution and not think too much about it. But as you said, if you're interested in being in control, that's something you really can't do. So how do you demystify and uncomplicate some of these things for clients? Because there are very important choices, and honestly, only an expert can help them make them.
I think we need to talk about financial systems and products for what they do, not necessarily what they're called or what they're labeled. Because let's say I sit down with somebody and they say to me, well, Ron, I've got my 401k here. I just retired. I need to figure out what's appropriate for a rollover for me. And I'm concerned on the one hand about stock market risk, that in the next bear market I could lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I don't want to be positioned where that could happen. And at the same time, I'm concerned with interest rates being so low and having no place to go but up. I don't want to lose money as interest rates go up. So is there anything else out there that I could position a portion of that 401k rollover where I don't have to worry about my account going backwards when the interest rates rise, and I don't have to worry about my account going backwards when the stock market plummets in the next bear market cycle, and I can make or have the potential to make a reasonable rate of return and know that that my income requirements can be met. And I'll go, yeah, well, what if we had an IRA account that did all of those things? Would that be a good fit for you? And they'll say, yeah, that would be wonderful. Is there anything that does that? And I go, yeah, absolutely. We can get that from an insurance company. And all of a sudden a person will go, oh, you mean an annuity? I don't want that. And I'll go, well, if we called it a Frasmataz and it did all these things, would you then want it?
One of the things that we are doing at Ron Gielak and Associates is we're creating a new herd. Ron, you began to answer my first question, which was, why do people run with the herd? That they need validation. And I think that's true, and I don't think you and I are going to be able to change that. But what we can do is present a new herd, because you have a lot of clients. These are people who are very satisfied, and they are people who can give validation. And so on rongielak.com, you go in to find examples, real-life examples of real people who perhaps could be your new reference point if you're listening to this. Your new herd, people who did not get scared by a word, but got engaged in really thinking about the purpose of what they're doing. So please go and take a look at ronaldgielak.com and look at some real-life examples. And before we finish this, Ron, let's talk about a few examples, something that has inspired you, some real people, examples of how they did refuse to follow the herd and did well. As you said, there were 100 happy people at the client appreciation yesterday, and it could be a composite we really do need to hear what other people are doing and how well they're doing in order to open up our receptivity to something new.
Oh, yeah, you're so absolutely correct, meaning people, I think, need to hear real-life examples or success stories of people who decided to think for themselves. And so I'll give you one example. I had a review meeting with a client who was a recent widow. And it was kind of a sad meeting because we were filling out death claim paperwork on a life insurance policy that her late husband had purchased. And she didn't imagine 5 years ago when they purchased the policy on his life that he would only live another 5 years. And everybody was telling them, no, you're too old for life insurance. You shouldn't be buying life insurance in your 60s. That's a dumb thing to do. But you know what? She's now dealing with the reality of losing one of the Social Security checks, because if one spouse passes away, the government's not paying the Social Security check to both spouses anymore. And she's dealing with the reality of the pension being cut by 50%. Had we not put that life insurance in place, she'd be faced with a situation of being forced to sell her house, move into an apartment, and make lifestyle choices that she shouldn't have to be making, at age 70. So that's one real-life example, not necessarily a happy one, but a real-life example.
A true one.
Right, right. Then I had dinner recently with a client, and he brought a statement on an annuity account that he had opened with us. And this was a fixed annuity account that offered index-linked interest. And guess when he opened this account? In the spring of 2008. And what did he tell me? He said, at the time I opened up this account with you, all my friends told me that I was an idiot, that I should never be putting money into an annuity with an insurance company. Why would I want to do that? Well, meanwhile, he's telling me how his friends lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. He's never lost a dime. His interest credit the last 12 months was over 16%, linking his interest credit where he gets a portion of what the S&P 500 does, and how happy he was that he thought for himself and that he listened to my advice. So, that's one example. I have other clients. I have another client who needed additional income in retirement but didn't want to pay through the nose in taxes. So what is it that we had put in place for them? We properly structured an indexed life contract to generate tax-free policy loans, which are real spendable dollars that do not incur a penny of tax liability. So once again, we like to deal with people who think for themselves, who aren't afraid to do the right thing because it's contrary to a magazine article.
I'm going to finish with an example that I have that you may not know, Ron, because yesterday, and I think everybody listening realizes we've just come from a major client appreciation event, which is the backbone of Ronald Gilak and Associates, the clients, because he does not advertise, he educates. And I met a fellow there who said to me that he had been doing so beautifully that he took it upon himself to tell his friend, another guy, a poker buddy, because that fellow was leaving his money languish in what you call certificates of disappointment. And he was frustrated because the fellow did come in for consultation, but because of privacy rules, he didn't know what the fellow did. I don't know his name, and he may have become your client, Ron, but this gentleman did not know. And he said to me, I sure hope he's not letting his money just sit there. That was his exact phrase. And what struck me was that they're probably very good friends. They're probably around the same age. They probably have a similar background. They certainly like each other a lot. And yet they probably are leading two very different retirements. This guy is very secure. He's very happy. He was making his 16%, he mentioned to me, so it might have been a similar kind of situation. And his friend is probably worried every day, unless he took action. And that's really what we're about right now, because as we conclude, I'm going to ask everybody listening, are you ready to spend 15 minutes that it takes to get the fear out of retirement and stop running with the herd? And if so, you start with a complimentary consultation with Ronald Gielak and Associates. You can register for our next webinar, which is called How Many Thousands Per Month Tax-Free Do You Want? And can you really stack the deck of cards in your favor? Now, you can both listen to prior webinars, register for the next webinar, and get your complimentary consultation all online at ronaldgielak, GELOK.com. And thank you, Ron, for being with us.
Oh, it's been a delight, Adrienne.